All right. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the late night edition of the Motor City Metrics podcast. This is episode 19. We got coming out some good vibes. This was probably going to be a pretty negative podcast until what transpired in the ninth inning of tonight's game. Yeah, let's just get into it, man. What did you guys see from the game tonight? I think we all want to talk about that and just kind of the relief of ending that 9-game losing streak.
Well, I'd say one of the big things that came out of that was we found out that SEMO does a really good Forrest Gump impression. Who knew?
Yeah, it was the player. It was the players only broadcast, and things got a little wild there for most of the middle innings when they were. Todd Jones was wandering the park eating Starburst and talking to a guy on his 21st birthday. But yeah, it. I think you have to feel good for Spencer Torkelson for having a game like that. You also, I think, you feel good for Andy Ibanez, who has been struggling like crazy, but really not in like a way that made a whole lot of sense. He wasn't striking out a ton. He just wasn't having hits fall. So it was nice to see both of those guys get a good game. And it's always nice to win a bullpen game, right? They didn't. He came to this game with no starter and came out and beat. Charlie Morton was outstanding.
Yes, he was.
But he can only pitch so many innings, and he's probably hurt or something, or something was tweaked. So yeah, I mean, a lot of good stuff. Makes you think that maybe the Braves might want to trade for another reliever, and the Tigers have a couple. So there you go.
Yeah, I would love to see like the win probability for that game, because if you would have told me when they were down and Charlie Morton was pitching, I would have told you there's no way they were winning that game. But yeah, what did you want to add, Huber?
Well, it was when you go back to Torkelson, obviously he started off the night with a nice single, but then he popped up twice with runners in scoring position. So what people are saying out there, the B word is getting attached to him more and more. But the home run was really heartening to see, because that qualifies as a bomb. Okay, that was no fence scraper. That thing was gone, and that's the kind of big time power. He's had great exit velocities, but he just hasn't quite had the lift to get that kind of power. That was really encouraging. And then he got a little gift at the end, and the end RBI. The guy didn't catch it, so he gets another hit too. So good for him.
Yeah, we talked about on the last pod, he was hitting like 100 in the month of June. And now his numbers look a little more respectable. They're not as good as they were in May, but, his OPS is approaching 700. I think league average is like 730. So he's getting there. But yeah, really good game for him. Good game for Ibanez. Even Tyler Alexander had a really nice game out of the bullpen. It was a good win for the Tigers, a surprising win. But
they needed it so badly. I mean, let's face it. That's an understatement. Losing the way they've lost lately, losing 9 in a row, things were looking relatively hopeless. They're down again tonight. It should do a lot for their collective psyche moving forward. Although the old saying, you're only as good as the next day's starting pitcher. So who knows? But it was good to see them get off to Schneid and get that win.
Yeah, especially with them losing. They lost to the Diamondbacks in a close game. I believe they were 1 strike away from beating the Diamondbacks. They also lost in the 9th inning to the Phillies. So they had two games they really kind of lost there at the end, which were disheartening. Thank you to Bloodright again coming through. $10.
Consistent patron.
Yes. Do you guys want to do anything?
Exquisite.
Oh,
I don't know what this Bloodright. He's always given us money. I feel bad. He's just like an allowance when I was a kid with my parents.
Bloodright, can you? Who are you, Bloodright? Can we get some some
who
information?
Are you? I don't want to know any more information.
Okay.
Just keep that gravy train rolling.
Anonymous benefactor.
I will say, to your point, John, I don't know, the sonic sort of win probability, but after Jake Rogers grounded out to end the 8th inning, Tigers had a 3% chance of winning that game.
Wow, there you go.
So there you go. Yeah, one of their better comebacks of the year, certainly.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Games like that feel fun when you're on this side of it, right? That's essentially the sort of game that happened when they lost to the Diamondbacks. The Tigers just happen to be on the other side of it. It's like, well, that sucks a lot, especially when it's, in the middle of a super long losing streak. So it is funny how one game could kind of wash away some bad feelings and some reality, honestly. I think the Tigers are much closer to that team that was losing all those games than they are to the team that fought back tonight. but still only 5 games out of first place.
There you
5
go.
games out of first, baby.
Well, it just shows you what a little dose of power can do. It can eliminate deficits quickly. They have been so power deficient. To see a game like this where the bats break out and hit a couple long balls, they deserve to win tonight. So good for them. Although it was very funny, a big play tonight in the 10th inning. I thought Jake Rogers' bunt was so bad it confused the Braves a little. If it was just a regular old bunt, they might make a play there.
Yeah. And I just wanted to shout out Zach Short as well, because I think he's been giving the Tigers really consistent at-bats. Every time I feel like he's up to bat, he's hitting the ball hard somewhere, and he had obviously the hit in the 9th inning to tie it. So I tweeted, I think he's one of the Tigers. He looks like one of the Tigers' best hitters right now. And I think the numbers back that up.
Well, it's something I looked into it just the other day. And Short is the only player on the Tigers with whom or where they have a winning record when he's in the lineup. Every other player on the team, they've got a losing record. He's the only one. It's probably just a coincidence, but he has been playing well. And it's like, yeah, at a certain point you go, okay, well, more playing time for you. He made a couple really nice plays at second base. And they're getting any contributions they can from anybody at this point.
And even though they lost the game against the Diamondbacks, I was impressed. He came in late in that game, and it was a small play, but it was the first play of the inning. He was fresh off the bench. He had a very tough play at second base, and he just handled that thing so smoothly. I was impressed by that. I mean, that's a guy like him. That's what he has to be. He has to be ready to contribute at a moment's notice when they need him, and he's been up to that task so far, no question.
Yeah, and one guy I wanted to touch on also was Kerry Carpenter, who returned over these last couple games. He started out like 8 for 11. I think he had 3 hits. I think his first 2 out of 3 games, he had 3 hits in those games. Had another hit tonight. I mean, how much does it mean to get him back? And also you had Matt Vierling back as well, who had 2 hits for the Tigers. How big is that? And, Kerry Carpenter, it looks like he's going to be the cleanup hitter for the Tigers moving forward.
It's certainly nice to have a guy with some pop in the lineup, and he's been hitting well. He had that nice throw the other day. He also had a bobble that wasn't great, but any bat you can get right now. I mean, we talked about it over and over again. This is a terrible offense overall in terms of just the way they produce with runners in scoring position, all that. So anybody with a pulse really helps, and Kerry Carpenter seems to. I mean, we still don't quite know what he is as a big leaguer, right? Like he hasn't had a ton of experience, but he's performed every time he plays, basically. Like he's had some slow stretches at times, but overall he's been a well above average offensive contributor. I think I haven't looked at his career WRC plus, but last I checked, I thought it was like 120. So yeah, it's nice to have that back. And I need somebody to talk to him about what led him to start wearing those do-rags or bandanas or whatever he's doing under his helmet.
Well, whatever works for him, I'm very interested in his approach because sometimes he looks like he's just trying to steer things to the opposite field, and he's kind of spraying it over there, and then suddenly, boom, he'll turn on one. And I would love to know what his mindset is on how he makes that decision mentally, what pitch he's looking for to turn on versus the ones he serves to the opposite field. But I like his approach. I've always thought his swing looks a little stiff, but it's effective. It really is. And hopefully he continues on this path.
Yes.
Well, we know that Carpenter's hitting coach, his personal hitting coach, is on Twitter. He's an irascible sort. He's not the most pleasant gentleman. He's also Aaron Judge's hitting coach.
Okay.
And so he points to these two. He's had some success there. There are also like 8 other guys who have struggled like crazy.
No.
He's coached. So, I mean, I think it's important to remember that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to hitting, but whatever Carpenter's doing, it's certainly seems to be working. This is a guy who was an afterthought at best a couple of years ago, and here he is like, hey, probably should be hitting 3rd or 4th for the Tigers. So it's cool.
Yeah, so he has OPS of 807 and 189 career at bats. So yeah, very small sample size. But yeah, he's been a welcome addition. And I know we've been really positive to start the show, which I don't think we expected to. But a guy I want to talk about is Javier Baez, because I've been seeing a lot of conversation with him online. He had the play that some people weren't even calling a highlight where he bobbled the ball and then flipped it to third. Baez on the season, 585 OPS. What do you guys kind of make of his season? And seemingly the fans are getting more and more upset and kind of throwing more shade at Baez.
Well, he had the one hot stretch after the benching in Toronto. He certainly has that capability where he can go on a run for a couple weeks at a time and help carry a team. And I'm sure he will again over the course of the summer, because that's just kind of been his MO over the course of his career. But I had a kind of a joking tweet earlier today. I called, and this is an old joke, but I called him the human ceiling fan, right? I mean, that's kind of what he is at the plate. He waves at a lot of stuff, and I'm always amazed any major league pitcher throws him a strike. I certainly wouldn't until I was absolutely back against the wall. I had to throw him one. I would be throwing junk and let him get himself out. It's maddening. You can't imagine this. Anybody who played through American Legion or high school ball can't imagine some of the pitches he swings at consistently. It's so frustrating, but that's who he is, and it's unlikely to change. And he's probably around for 4 more years.
Yeah, the thing that mystifies me about Baez is just where the power went. Like we all expected him to strike out a lot. We knew that coming in. We knew he was going to expand the zone. He's actually been he's still swinging, missing, and swings at pitches that seemed like he had no business offering at. But he's improved that aspect of his game a lot, actually, at least in terms of striking out. But the power just disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's a product of his approach. I don't want to say he's like a petulant teenager who's like, okay, if you're going to make me not strike out, then I'm not going to hit power either. I'm not suggesting that, but it almost feels like to get that power hitting Baez, you need to accept that fishing expedition Baez. And I don't know, like you see the plays, like there was a play, he made an error tonight, maybe 2, but he had one where he bobbled it and then recovered and made a really heady play. That's just who he is. I think he's a really volatile player. And he's not the guy you want to build your team around. He's a great 4th, 5th piece on a team, I think. Yeah. He's a guy that could be electric at times and can come up with big hits and really benefit you when you've got some other good players there. But if you're basing things on him, he's just too up and down. But that's the way the roster's built right now, so there's not much we can do about it.
And, you're right. I 100% agree. If he's in your second tier of producers and he's a guy who can go on his little 3-week run where he really helps the team, but he's your 6th or 7th guy, yeah, that's fantastic. That's kind of Craig Monroe-ish from back in the day. I mean, who could carry a team for a couple weeks and then disappear.
Yeah, I think other thing I look at with Baez is I was seeing some comments online about like how he potentially doesn't want to be here. Could you guys ever see it getting to that point where potentially the Tigers have to, cut bait with them of some sort, or if the relationship gets that bad? Because I've seen rumors about that, or like, people speculating he doesn't want to be here. Like, I don't know what to make of that.
Well, in terms of the opt-out, he would have to really want to go and play somewhere that he wants to be in order to turn down that money, right? I mean, it just makes, to the common man anyway, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? I mean, you're going to take that cash because he's not going to find that on the open market again. So he would make, some fraction of it, I think maybe 30% tops on the open market. So has he made enough money in his lifetime so far? And then by taking a small contract would still have money coming in to opt out? I think there's less than a 2% chance of that, to be honest with you. So then it'd be the Tigers, cutting bait and working out some kind of deal to pay him off over time. So it doesn't sound too attractive. I can't imagine Chris Ilitch finds that a very appealing idea.
No, I was thinking about this earlier today because I posted a snarky thing about, the Tigers have Baez for 4 more years. I just was thinking about the old election chant. I was like, 4 more years. Yeah. Pleasing myself in that way. And so then I was like, what's the longest amount of a contract left for a player to ever have just been released? and I don't think it's anywhere close to 4 years. It might be 2, maybe. It feels more like a 1.5. I don't know. Like there have been instances where I think the Angels basically cut bait with Josh Hamilton,
Yeah.
but I think they worked out a trade for basically nothing and ate all his salary, I think, and just gave him to the Rangers for something. Maybe there's a scenario where the Mets remember Baez being good for them at second base. I mean, I don't think so. I don't think the Cubs would be, knocking down the door to get Baez back. So I don't think there's a real, eat his salary and you get anything back for him. I think you're stuck with him for at least 2 years, probably 3.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect segue that we're talking about bias because one thing I wanted to touch on was the Avila interview. We finally heard from Avila. I think he was on Todd Frazier's podcast. I think it's called Foul Territory. He was asked, like, what are some moves he regretted? He named the Justin Verlander trade. Well, he named another trade. I can't remember what other trade he named, but he also mentioned some trades that he thought, were good, like the Nicholas Castellanos trade. He mentioned the Shane Green for Joey Wentz trade. Yeah, I don't know. I was kind of interested to hear what he said. I watched Chris Castanella's video. He mentioned the free agent signings that Avila made, and with us talking about Baez, that was kind of one thing I saw was like Baez was like Avila's last gift to Tigers fans was signing Baez to that 6-year deal. But what did you see the video, and what did you kind of make of his comments hearing from Avila, who, the Detroit Tigers, as we know it, Avila is probably the most responsible for the product we have on the field right
now. I watched it as somebody who does these podcasts. I know that it's difficult to speak on camera and give public speaking interviews or whatever like that. But I was, as always, kind of taken aback by I guess how poor of a public speaker he is. And I don't listen. I use and and all that stuff too. But this is the general manager of a team, and he was hemming and hawing for like 30 seconds. It felt like, but yeah, I mean, I was amazed he actually went on there and talked at all, because what can you say? It actually kind of sounded to me like he still feels like he's a member of the Tigers, which I get, right? But he was saying we did this and we did that, and he mentioned how he regretted the Austin Meadows trade because of what Prodigy's has done, and yeah, he was like, pointing to Reese Olson and Alex Lang as wins, and it's like, well, okay, but that's because you guys were so awful that you just were able to get something for a couple players. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know what really to say about it. He's the former GM, and he tried to accentuate the positives while sort of acknowledging some of the negatives, but not really that much.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised he gave the interview at all, but it's fine. He came close to being honest about everything and upfront. Give him credit for that. There's not much to say. The proof is you look at the record. You are what your record says you are, as Parcells used to say, right? There was a lot of things that went wrong. Some of it was bad luck. Some of it was poor decision making. Some of it probably gets kicked up to the owner before the general manager. But no matter how you count it, all of it just came into a mess. He started with a couple of bad deals potentially when he took the job, had a lot of work to do, and showed that he was never really quite up to the task. The Zimmerman signing blew up on him right away, and that kind of things were kind of downhill from there, for a lot of respects. So the big thing is we're in a different era now. Scott Harris is here. It's a regime. Who knows if they're going to be any good? We don't know. But, they're not going to clean house now, right? Not in year one. So we're kind of in at least probably a 3 to 6 year pattern here with Scott Harris to see how it's going to be different from Avila, and what changes and what's noticeable. That's going to be really interesting, more so than even looking back at Avila, because we can blame Avila all day long for Marcelo Meyer and blah, 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 but we're moving on.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I wanted to go, because we did have a comment in the chat from Christopher, said, where is Scott Harris? He doesn't seem to talk too much. And that was kind of my thinking is with Scott Harris, how he's been running things. With Abanya struggling for as long as he did, he continued to stick with him. Nick Maton has continued to struggle, but he's stuck with him in the lineup. Is this kind of how Scott Harris is going to do things, or he just doesn't really have any options? And then in terms of like Scott Harris and not really hearing from him, What do you guys kind of make of the job he's done overall?
Well, I mean, maybe I am misremembering things, but I don't particularly remember hearing from Dave Dombrowski or Al Avila all that often either during the season, right? You hear from him around draft time, around trade season. I don't know. I mean, it's one thing as fans we don't hear from him. We also hear that the beat writers basically can't find him, can't talk to him, things like that. But that seems to be his MO. I mean, this is where a different regime. So I don't really know what to make about what he's doing. We know that he's certainly been more active in terms of the scrap heap, if you will, claiming players on waivers. Some of them have worked out pretty well, or fairly well, right? Some of them have not. I think Tyler Holton has worked out pretty well. Banez has been, up and down. I wouldn't claim that as a huge success, but he's played. But we know he's doing that. But I don't know. Even I came into the season thinking that that Scott Harris wasn't going to put up with sort of poor performance for very long. And that hasn't really been the case. We've seen a lot of guys playing poorly for extended stretches, and they're still there. Maybe that's just the fact that they don't have other options, really. Maybe if Andre Lipsius had been crushing in AAA, they would have tried him instead of Nick Maton, but he wasn't. Yeah. Or, if Justin Henry Malloy kept hitting after April, they may have tried him, but he fell off pretty hard. Parker Meadows hasn't done a ton in AAA. It's like all the guys that were kind of, he talked about earmarking playing time for the young guys. Well, none of the young guys have really earned it, unfortunately. So I don't know if and everybody always says oh, well, they can't be any worse than this guy and this guy and this guy. And it's like, well, maybe, but what if they are exactly as bad and then they're young players and their confidence is destroyed and you can never do anything with them?
Yeah, that was just my thing. He just probably doesn't think he has any better options. But that's kind of what we thought. Is if you would have told me Nick Maton would struggle this bad, Scope has been this bad, Ibanez struggled as bad as he would, but these guys are still getting at bats every day, which kind of just speaks to the depth of the Tigers right now.
Well, they didn't have a very productive offseason, right? And I don't think they tried to. Yep. So once that first layer of depth was pierced, okay, I don't know what else they could have done. As Chris was saying, if Andre Lipsius was hitting 320, okay, fine, but he wasn't. So I just don't have a good feeling for him yet. I think we're going to learn so much at this trade deadline of what he values and what kind of deals he can swing. We're going to learn a lot in the first, 3 to 5 to 10, even first 10 rounds of this draft, how they allot their money. Things will start coming together about an impression of Scott Harris because he does make it a mystery. He is a man of mystery. He disappears. I think Dombrowski at least seemed like he was around the batting practice. I think some journalists, I bet, talked to him off the record more. He just seemed like he was in the mix. And from what you hear, Harris is just not there. He's off in a room somewhere. I don't know, but hard to say.
Yeah. No, I mean, that does seem to be the impression so far. I don't know. I mean, there are different styles of leadership, I guess, or running a management, if you will. He may be, think back to the movie Moneyball, right? Where Billy Bean was like, hey, you go fire him. Or, you go tell him he's cut. That sometimes guys need to learn that. Sometimes guys just want to do things from afar. I don't think people are going to like it until the Tigers start winning. If he does it this way and the Tigers win, everybody's going to love it. Nobody will care. Where's Scott Harris? Who cares? They're winning. They're losing right now and people want to see them. But if you're Scott Harris, what do you say? Well, the things I thought for sure we were going to win a bunch of games and now we aren't. And, all the players I got suck. That's not what he's going to say. He's just like, hey, we're doing what we can. We're making one baseball move at a time. We're trying to dominate the strikes. Just all his particular individual cliches are going to come out, and I don't think you're going to get a whole lot from that. I don't know if he's walking through the locker room every day and talking to players. Doesn't sound like it, but who knows? Maybe I'll have to get down there a couple times.
Yeah. But yeah, we did have a couple comments or questions in the chat. But is there anything else you guys wanted to go over, talk about?
I want to run a question past Chris.
All right.
Draft.
Gotcha.
We're getting closer.
About
Let's
a month
say,
away.
first 2 picks, Cruz, Langford. Now you're down to Skeens and the 2 high school bats. And maybe Teal, the catcher, if you want to throw him in. Where are you going? Where is the Scott Harris, Chris Brown brain trust going?
If it's me, I take Walker Jenkins. I'm happy taking that. I love that swing, big body. I think he's going to grow into power, athletic. Looks like a future, all-star corner outfielder. I do get the idea though that the Tigers might go Kyle Teal, just based on all the speculation online, and that's the one pick. And I mentioned this on the minor league podcast last night. Teal is the one pick that you could make and then really start to do some draft pool shenanigans, because if Teal doesn't go 3, he's probably going 6 or below. So you can probably shave $1.5 million off his bonus and still get him for more than he would otherwise make. So then it becomes the sport of, hey, can you float so-and-so all the way down that far, or who's still available? Can you buy him out of his Stanford commit or Virginia commit or whatever? That would be the kind of, all things being equal, I would hope they take the best player. I hope Langford's there for them and they take him, and we're all, everybody's happy about it. And he might work out, he might not, but he seems like the best player that's going to be there at 3. But if he's not there, if it is Cruz, Langford, then sure, give me Teal, and let's have some weird fun spreading the bonus pool around. But personally, I would take Jenkins. But
okay,
so Teal. He's the catcher, right?
Yeah, Virginia.
So what is his ceiling? Is he like? Because I'm thinking if you're taking a catcher that high, you're want Adley Rutschman, Buster Posey, all-star everyday guy. Does he have that type of ceiling?
I wouldn't put that level of first overall franchise. I mean, Posey didn't go first overall. He should have, but the Rays got a little funny. I wouldn't put that level of ceiling on him, but he's a guy who was highly regarded heading into the 2020 draft, but it was the 2020 draft. And so lots of guys slipped through the cracks there, we saw, because Cruz was a highly regarded guy, but he didn't have a great summer, and so he just decided to go to school. Colt Keith probably would have gone to school, but it turned out he didn't want to.
Yeah.
And so the Tigers got a deal there. That's another thing we were kind of contemplating today. Like, what would junior Colt Keith be doing at Arizona State right now? But anyway, so Teal is a left-handed hitting catcher. Is an above-average athlete. He's hitting like 425 this year, something like that. Has 12, 14 home runs. So there's some above-average power. I think average above-average hitter. Good plate discipline, strong arm, good defender behind the plate. He's also athletic enough to play other positions, the outfield, maybe even third base. So there's some floor there. It's in an ordinary draft, he's probably a top 5 pick most of the time. This is that one weird draft where you've got 5 guys who would potentially be a number 1 pick in other years. But it would feel a little bit like the smartest guy in the room move, like a Jackson Jobe move, but I could see it there. I don't think the catcher of the future is in the Tiger system right now, unfortunately.
Exactly right. I agree with that.
And even if he is just a platoon catcher, you're getting the strong side of the platoon there, so that works out. But
how about if you dream a little bit and say he's a Joe Mauer light?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's fun.
That's an MVP, man.
Yeah, I said light. Yeah. Mauer light.
Yeah, I mean, I think you gotta largely maybe a hit over power guy, but still going to hit enough and have enough extra base pop to give you some run production. I could see it that way. It's always tough when you make comps to Joe Mauer. Mauer's going to be a Hall of Famer, so it's like
borderline. But yes.
I think he should be, because catchers are woefully underrepresented in. Although I think he played like his last 700, 800 games at first base, maybe I'm wrong about that.
I'm not sure how many, but yeah. Well, it was basically, for me, it was the high average and left-handed bats. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
But did you have anything to add, you?
No. Just wanted Chris's opinion on that.
Yeah, so I had a question too, but I mean, if you have an opinion on it too, but it was about Jace Young, because I know he's been playing well down in the minors. He has an OPS of about 850 right now. I know we talked about him a little bit on the last pod, but has he changed your mind, Chris? Or I don't know if you've paid attention to him, or is Jace Young a future starter for the Tigers? Is that kind of his ceiling right now?
I would put his ceiling as an everyday regular, I guess. I'm still, I think, lower than a lot of people on Young. I think Rogelio has started to warm up to him a little bit. He had that great week where he was player of the week. He had a big game last week, but he also did basically not much in the other 4 games of the week. And to me, it's more about just the visual evaluation of him. There's just a lot of it kind of reminds me a little bit of when Torkelson started in West Michigan and wasn't hitting the ball. And a lot of it was like he's missing pitches right over the heart of the plate, or a fastball at the top of the zone, but over the middle, and he's swinging right through it. Now, when he connects, he's doing some damage, which was one of my concerns heading into this year. It was like I didn't see any real power from him last year. It was everything was kind of weak fly balls to the opposite field. He's putting a charge into some balls now, which is nice to see. But it's still, it's still hard to project him as an above average hitter just based on his production. He's got a good eye, and he's a better fielder than I really gave him credit for. He's mostly hampered by his body and his overall speed. He's a slow-footed guy, but he's really fundamentally sound. He makes all the plays that he can get to. He's got a decent enough arm to make the double play turn. I think he'd be just fine at second base. I just don't know if he's going to hit enough for that to work. But I don't know. Things have been trending up, I guess, lately. But every time I watch him, I'm just not terribly impressed in person. But I could just be getting a lot of bad games.
Yeah. And yeah, we did have a couple questions that we can end the show with, but just thank you to everyone in the chat, like Christopher, Sam, Noah, Harrison, Detroit Generate, leaving great comments as always. Thank you guys for making the show a little more interesting. But Noah had a question. He asked about your thoughts on Ty Madden, because he has been struggling a little bit. His ERA is about 4.4 down in AA. We know he had a good start to the season, but yeah, he was just asking what are your thoughts were on Ty Madden and his struggles as of late?
Well, I mean, I open that one up to you guys if you've seen much of him or if you've paid a lot of attention. I don't want to monopolize the conversation here.
No, go ahead, Chris. I'm only scouting box scores, so you.
Yeah, me too. So,
Madden and Flores have kind of been two of the most frustrating players in the Tiger system this year because they've taken small steps backward, or at least, stagnated, if you will. The other, I guess you could also complain about maybe Dingler and Crouch is that same category of guys who just haven't seemed to be taking a step forward. But Madden is particularly confusing because he looked so good in his first start of the year. He looked like he had a brand new, like, dastardly knuckle curve. He was throwing fastballs by guys, and he just hasn't looked close to that since. And part of it, I think, for me is, and he's one of those guys whose fastball doesn't have ideal. It's kind of a Reese Olson fastball, right? Like he can throw it pretty hard, but it doesn't have ideal shape, and it doesn't really miss bats. But he's got other stuff to go with. But to me, he's kind of strangely unathletic. If that makes sense. Like it's not necessarily. There's a little bit of like a robotic level to his operation when he's pitching, and he just seems to struggle to repeat his arm slot. And so what you'll get is he'll have sliders that'll be 81, and he'll have sliders that'll be 89, and they'll have it. And I don't necessarily know if it's on purpose. Like it just feels like there are times where he can't get that arm slot, and the pitch count goes up. And in his most recent start, he gave up back-to-back home runs to start the game, and one was on a breaking ball down and in to a lefty, and then one was on a 97-mile-an-hour fastball to Kobe Mayo, who hit it to right field, just poked it the opposite field, and that was the first home run he's given up to a right-handed hitter all year. And it just everything just seems a little bit off. And Rogelio and I have talked about, you don't want to make too much about coaching, but Dan Rickleball was the pitching coach in Erie last year when they had a lot of success. Most of the pitchers were pitching really well, and the Tigers moved him down to West Michigan, which may be a better thing for the organization overall.
Sure.
To get that guy working with pitchers at a younger level. But and we've seen some promising results with the pitchers at West Michigan. But the result is that I don't know if the pitching coaches there in Erie, and I'm not trying to like denigrate these guys. I just don't know if they have whatever magic touch it was that he had to maybe help guys make tweaks or get out of the funk that they're in. Mm-hmm. So the stuff is still there. I feel like he needs to figure out a way to throw it more consistently, which is, I guess, the name of the game once you're in the upper minors and in the big leagues. and he didn't ask about this, but on the Wilmer Flores front, he actually has looked, I think, significantly better the last 3 starts for him. The last one, if you look at the numbers, weren't great, but we put out a tweet about what was going on in that game. That was some of the worst umpiring you'll see, at least from a balls and strikes standpoint. The Greg Gagne, the announcer for Erie, mentioned, and they have stats for this, that the home plate umpire in that game was statistically the worst in the Eastern League. He missed 36 balls and strike calls in the previous game. 36 in one game.
Looked like a young guy.
Yeah, and it just seems like and I've never umpired. I think it's probably way harder than most people realize, particularly when you're dealing with guys throwing the mid to upper 90s with ridiculous breaking balls. But it seemed like he just couldn't call strikes in the bottom third. He just couldn't.
That's what I was going to say. I watched, once the hullabaloo came about, I tried to watch as much as I could. And yeah, everything knee high and, a couple inches either way, he was really struggling. No question about it.
And it just would, like the point with Flores, his struggles early in the year were kind of related to just his stuff. His stuff was down. His fastball wasn't nearly as fast. His breaking balls weren't as sharp. He was working on a changeup. But in the last couple of outings, the fastball has been a little bit better. It touched 97 in his last outing. Was 96 the game before that. He's throwing better breaking balls. They have more late bite to him. So I think he's working his way through it, which is good to see. And I think maybe we'll see that later on this year from Ty Madden. At least you can cross your fingers. But yeah, I don't think there's any like huge reason for concern just yet. It's just like you got to pump the brakes a little bit, because I remember after his first start, Pat Caputo tweeted out that like there's no reason for the Tigers to not call him up. listen, okay. And it's like, all right, Pat, yeah, okay, let's wait a little bit. So
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, we did have a question from Sean about Wilmer Flores, just if you saw him more as a like a closer. He asked like more in like the Mason Angler, Garrett Hill type role. I wouldn't mind seeing him as a closer. I've always thought of him as a reliever. His strikeout numbers are down this year, but I don't know if you or Chris, you had thoughts on what his long-term role could be. I think he'll get a chance in the rotation, but I don't know. I like the idea of developing young relievers. Maybe Reese Olson could be that, but Jason Foley was a young reliever. They kind of developed into that role. Same thing with Alec Lange. So yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing Wilmer Flores as that being his long-term fit with the Tigers in the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, so we came into the beginning of last year kind of assuming that Flores would be a reliever, but prior to that, we basically had a handful of outings in the Complex League and then in Low A Lakeland, and then they sent him to the Arizona Fall League where he got beat up. But he flashed some really interesting stuff. He was throwing hard, good-looking breaking ball. It was like, okay, this guy's a reliever. And when you watch him pitch, you go, that's a reliever's delivery. He falls off really hard he like spins all the way around. But last year he threw tons of strikes, and there were quality strikes. And that's like the main concern with a delivery like that, right? Is he's not going to have command. We did last year, and the stuff was good enough. He was throwing fastballs right by guys, right in the heart of the zone, which is a good sign. You don't want to live there, but if you can do it, do it. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of back now to probably 50-50 that he ends up in the bullpen just based on what's happened. But I think there's no harm in continuing to develop him as a starter. He doesn't seem to really have trouble pitching deep into games. His stuff doesn't get progressively worse as the game goes along. He's a big kid. It's just, I think it ultimately come down to, the command and if his stuff would play up out of the bullpen.
It'll be interesting. We're talking basically, can he get through a lineup twice or at least 2.5 times, right, and survive? Because, 30 years ago, the difference between a reliever and a starter was a wide chasm. Now, I mean, starters work less and less. I mean, it's not as big of a difference anymore. It's just a matter, can the stuff hold up for 2 trips through the order? And they got to believe they're going to give him every opportunity to prove that he can do it before they ever even give him a hint of the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that Reese Olson was more destined for the bullpen than Flores, and they've given him a couple opportunities to start. And man, he's really kind of shut my mouth so far. I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop if and when hitters just learn to not swing at anything but fastball. But maybe they won't. Maybe he's just gonna carve them up with changeups and breaking balls, and that'd be awesome. That would be a great development. But yeah, not to go off on a tangent here, but like I just feel like developing relievers is actually probably the easiest thing you could do in baseball now.
Mhm.
That developing big leaguers is not easy at any level, but there are gradations of it, right? Like it's really damn hard to develop a frontline starter. It's really hard to develop a middle order bat, but you can develop relievers kind of simply, I guess is the best way to put it. And the example I'm using lately is Blake Holub, who's a kid that they drafted out of D2 St. Edwards in Texas. He was an outfielder and pitcher, two-way player. Saw him a little bit last year in Lakeland. He looked interesting, was touching 94, 95, 96, but wasn't throwing any strikes. It was looked like kind of all off balance. This year he's throwing a ton of strikes. He's got nasty fastball in terms of shape. Like it's in the ride on it. It's elite level ride for a 94, 96 mile an hour fastball. He's upgraded his breaking balls. He's throwing more strikes. He's in Double-A. His first two outings, I think he's struck out 5 in 3 innings, something like that, maybe more. And that's, like I said, there's just the baseline for arm talent in professional baseball is so high, and there's so many pitchers that you can kind of grab a bunch and figure out a way to make them a reliever. So
for
there's a guy who has
I was going to say, for a lot of them, there's no reason not to bring them on fast too.
Yeah. And good. My point with that was just if there's a guy who has a chance to start, I think you give him as many chances as possible before you make that call, because there are other ways. Yeah, like you said, some of these relievers, Holub stuff would probably play in the big leagues right now, honestly. And this is a guy who has barely been pitching. I'm sure they're going to want to refine some things and have him see teams more than 2 or 3 times just so they can see how it plays. But yeah, stuff like that, you can move a guy really quickly, but it's harder to get those 3 or 4 pitches and learn how to go through the lineup 2 times. And so I think you got to be a little bit more patient with guys like Flores and Madden.
Yeah. We do have one more question I guess we can end the show on, because I think people are kind of interested in talking about the draft. There's a question from JP Jonah about Walker Jenkins over Max Clark. He said, is Walker Jenkins over Max Clark strictly based on size, strength, and potential to even fill out more? What are your guys' thoughts on kind of them two, kind of comparing the two prospects in Clark and Jenkins?
Well, just from what I understand and the video I've watched and everything you hear, just to make it really simple, I think Walker Jenkins is a guy who might hit 35 home runs. Max Clark is going to be a more varied game and hit 20 home runs. You know what I mean? It could be as simple as that. And it sounds like Max Clark is more of a sure thing to stay in center field, but it's just a matter of what you're looking for, the big power bat or the more versatile player.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating dichotomy there between those two players, because you do have with Jenkins, you have like the prototypical, he's 6'3", 205, 210 or whatever, probably going to get bigger and stronger, could grow into an ideal right fielder. But right now he's apparently fast enough and athletic enough to handle center field. And you never know. Sometimes guys like that move very quickly and stay in center field. Look at Riley Green. I think not many of us expected that. We saw him making diving catches in West Michigan. We're like, okay, that's fun. It's not going to continue. And then they're like, all right, it's going to continue. Now, I don't know, long term, I don't think Riley Green is your answer in center field, just because you got to hope at some point they're going to find some guy who's like a 70 runner with 70 defense who could also hit. Maybe not. But yeah, so like, and this is kind of where you fall back on those comps. You just like, he's kind of this kind of player. Baseball America kept comparing Walker Jenkins to Austin Meadows, which would be pretty good. The healthy Austin Meadows.
Tampa, Austin Meadows, yeah.
Yeah. But since they've been making that comparison, all the scouting reports this year were that he's actually more athletic and faster. So a more athletic, faster Austin Meadows sounds pretty good. The Max Clark comparisons you run the gamut. You can hear, people say, hey, maybe he's the next Corbin Carroll, who the Tigers just got plenty of the other day or the other series. But he could also be a Pete Crow Armstrong type, who could hit. He's going to run. He's going to play plus defense and center, but he might not be much of an impact bat.
Right.
Or he could be a Mickey Moniak type, who was the first overall pick and then just never did a whole lot. He's finally made it to the big leagues, but he's kind of hanging on.
Fringy.
Yeah. And a lot of that has to do with Max Clark's just physical projection. He's basically as big as he's going to get and as strong as he's going to get. Now that's that they probably said the same thing about Jared Kelenic, and he took that to heart. And it sounds like Clark is kind of that type of player who's very like, I'm going to prove you guys wrong. I'm going to do this. All the rumors are that he really wants to be the first overall pick, and he's willing to take a huge haircut to do that. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it's going to be one that's going to be fun to look back on in 4 or 5 years and be like, well, we blew that, or wow, we were right. But yeah, right now I tend to lean more towards the guys who have the physical projection, but it's like razor thin. If they took Max Clark, I wouldn't be upset.
Yeah, I think Tigers want the middle of the order here. They want some guys that can hit some home runs, and I think Walker Jenkins probably projects as a guy who has more power. But hopefully, Wyatt Langford will be there at 3, and we don't have to make that debate because I don't know. I'd be really happy with Wyatt Langford, but yeah, Walker Jenkins.
I don't think it's out of the question. Dylan Cruz is there. I mean, just depending on how much money they want to spend on those other picks, I mean, it's very possible.
Yeah, it's so the one thing that you keep seeing in mock drafts is that the Nationals apparently like Paul Skeens quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they had the chance to take Dylan Cruz or Paul Skeens, I think that would be very difficult for them. But yeah, there's definitely a scenario where it's like Clark or Jenkins or Langford goes 1 and Skeens goes 2, and there's Dylan Cruz waiting for the Tigers. I don't know. Dylan Cruz has just been so consistent and so productive that I feel like it's going to be hard for the Pirates to ultimately for them to pass up on him. But who knows? Like we said, there's some chicanery that happens with the bonus pools, and the Pirates did it a couple years ago.
They're not afraid.
They ended up getting 5 or 6 of the top so-called top 50 players in the draft. Yep. And now Henry Davis looks pretty good, but he's not necessarily first overall good. But I'm sure they're fine with it. They're doing okay right now.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's all we have. It was a late night tonight. But yeah, Tigers will be back at it against the Braves for 2 more, and then they got the Twins. So
who's pitching tomorrow? Do we know?
Reese Olson.
There you go.
It's gonna be a good one against Spencer Strider. So
I just want to mention that there was one fun thing that it was going to be my Inside the Numbers a couple of weeks ago, but I couldn't make it to the show. And it was the number of swinging strikes in baseball from pitchers since the beginning of May. And Spencer Strider is like number 1 at 165, and number 2 is Luis Castillo at 125. And then it's like 70 more guys within 40, and Strider is just number 1 by a million. And so we were having some fun in the Discord, like how many swinging strikes is he going to get tomorrow? Is it 25, 30? Like,
that's just Javi Baez, right?
Yeah.
It reminds me of when Max Scherzer faced the Tigers, and didn't he have like 20 strikeouts or something?
Yeah,
ridiculous?
He struck out 20. Yeah, it was the fourth ever. Was the 4th or 5th 20 strikeout game in MLB history. Clemens did it twice. Johnson did it. Kerry Wood.
Yeah. So 5.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Spencer Strider did give up 8 earned runs, I think, his last start, which, I mean, he's still one of, I think, the favorites for the Cy Young, even though his ERA is, closer to 4. But, maybe the Tigers can get to him again. Crazier things have happened.
Yeah. Yeah. The win is a win.
Oh, yeah. Win is a win. The Oakland A's have won 5 in a row, so anything's possible. The Tigers come out tomorrow and win another one. What the hell?
Yeah. Yeah. I saw the Brewers fans were ready to jump off a cliff after dropping 3 of the. Yeah. Whew. But baseball's a long season. How many games are we in right now? 70?
Yeah. It's been a lot ups and downs, man. We've had a very up and down season. But
64 games in the season. There's 98 games left.
Yeah. So it'll be an up and down season, but we'll be here to cover it. Draft coming up early next month. Should be a lot of good stuff coming out. But yeah, thank you for everyone who joined. And we will see you back again on Thursday. And also make sure to check out Tigers Minor League Report, because Chris and Raj, if you need any information about Tigers Minor League, they're the place to go.
Secret information. I would tell you, if anybody saw this, Raj isn't here to talk about this, but he was quite frustrated with something. It's in the grand scheme of things, it's not. It doesn't matter. But he got news about a promotion, like some players moving up Saturday morning. But he sat on it because he was supposed to. He knew that it's like, hey, I can't do this. And then Lynn Henning breaks it last night, like 7 p.m. on Sunday night. And he's like, he was just really frustrated because it's like, it wasn't supposed to come out until today. It was just officially announced like an hour ago. But I guess there's no honor among among scoops.
Oh,
So,
Beat writers beat each other up.
yeah.
Yeah. But yes, thank you guys for joining, and we will see you guys on Thursday.